But what would you say kind of stands out to you as sort of the single biggest piece of evidence that Bon was involved somehow in the writing of at least the lyrics for Back in Black?
Well, one that there has been so many contradictory statements made by the band members themselves about actually what Bon had prepared for that album. So you have Angus Young sort of saying Bon wrote a little of the stuff, and he's come out and sort of said that Bon had played drums on a couple of demos, 2 songs. And then another interview, another song gets mentioned, and then recently we had Simon Wright from AC/DC coming out and saying that Angus Young had played him a demo of Bon Scott playing on Back in Black, the song. So that suddenly there are 4 songs. And then you have Malcolm Young saying, before he died, that Bon had prepared nothing. That, we're waiting for you to come in, Bon, and we're all ready to go with the music and start writing the lyrics. In the book, as you say, I've written an entire chapter kind of setting out what the case is for Bon having written lyrics on that album. And there are multiple kind of examples of things that people have said, or such as the ex-manager of AC/DC, David Krebs, saying that he didn't believe that the credits for Back in Black were accurate, that Bon's name had been taken off for whatever reason, but that he wasn't involved in the decision. I mean, that's an amazing statement coming from someone who was the manager of AC/DC. But I want readers to kind of look at all that in totality, but I also want them to kind of think about how Bon wrote lyrics in the lead up to Back in Black. And that is that we know just from the songs themselves, one, that that Bon wrote from his life. He wrote about experiences that he'd had. He wrote about people that he knew. I documented in the last book, how I made a case that You Shook Me All Night Long was about Holly X in Miami. And I think that's convinced a lot of people. So he was working up lyrics all the time, whether it was, from album to album. Sometimes that, lyrics might work on this album, or they would get held over and then sort of reworked for another record or given a new title or whatever. And we know that from, the Bonfire box set, where they released all these songs that we know, but which had different titles. We heard the early versions of these songs. So, they were working on songs over a period of years. It wasn't just like in 2 weeks or whatever. Bon was constantly writing in his notebook, a notebook that he carried around, and he would work on and rework lyrics. And I find it very hard to believe that when you watch these kind of, these stupid American documentaries on the making of Back in Black, or what was it, like Behind the Music, docos like that, where it makes out that Bon had prepared nothing. That, by the band's own admission, he was sort of deeply involved in the composition of songs, getting ready to record in London, but that he had nothing prepared. And what's the evidence to show that he did? Well, one, I got to speak to Silver Smith, his ex-lover and his muse for so much of the 70s. I mean, Power Age is essentially about Silver Smith. And she told me before she died that he had called her the night he died to say that he'd finished the lyrics for the entire album. That's why he wanted to go out. That's why he called her up. But he wanted to go out and celebrate with her, but she didn't want to do it. So she put him onto Alistair Kinnear. So I find it very hard to believe that, you know, Bond's lifetime habit of working on lyrics and doing so over an extended period of time suddenly stopped with Back in Black, which was their most important album at that point. You know, they were, you know, still looking for their mega breakthrough. Highway to Hell had done very well for them, but it really hadn't put them over the top. Why wouldn't Bond be working on lyrics for this record? So, coincidentally, I mentioned AC/DC fans .net, the forum before, but someone had appeared on that forum, I think it was about a year ago, and said that they had been a recording musician back in the 80s, early 90s, and had worked with Mark Durnley, who was one of the engineers on Highway to Hell. And during their recording for this album, that this person said that Durnley had actually said to this guy that You Shook Me All Night Long had sort of had its origins in Love Hungry Man, which was on Highway to Hell. That the lyrics for You Shook Me All Night Long were sort of tried with the tune for that song, but they didn't quite work, and they were held over for Back in Black. And for posting this story on the fan forum, this guy got expelled. He was banned. He was banned from acdcfans.net. And I was actually very upset because I wanted to find out who this guy was. What a great story! I mean, this could have unlocked a lot. And but he was banned, and then he actually left a comment on one of my videos on YouTube, and sort of repeated the story that he told on acdcfans.net. And I said, get in touch with me. I'd love to hear this from you privately. And I found out who he was. And his story completely checked out. He was in a rock band that had a record contract with EMI. I checked Discogs and saw his name on the album that he supposedly worked on with Mark Durnley. And I said, I'd love to tell this story in my new book. And he got very nervous about it. He thought he was going to get sued, by Mark Durnley or AC/DC for telling this story. And I said, no, you can't get sued for this. This is what someone's told you. We're not saying it's necessarily true, but you're entitled to actually say what someone told you. He said he was okay with me repeating the story, but I couldn't use his name. So unfortunately, I can't tell you who he is, but I did do my homework and figure out that this guy was quite legitimate, and why would he have any reason to tell me this story? He gained nothing from it. And I think enough time has passed from when Back in Black was released, in 1980. So what are we talking? 44 years ago. And now, to be able to kind of tell this story, and I think all the signs, all the sort of anecdotal evidence that's sort of been amassed over the years, not just by me, but there were writers before me who were also looking into this, and I pay them tribute in my book. I'm not the first person who's come up with this idea that Bond had something to do with Back in Black, but I do feel like I've kind of finished their job. And I think it's pretty compelling now. And I would say that the 16,000 people who are part of my Bon Scott group on Facebook, I would say probably 95% of them would believe the arguments that are made in the book. I mean, there's still 5% who just won't accept it. And then you have this sort of AC/DC lunatic fringe, the people who are sort of issuing the death threats and stuff,
Mm.
who just think I'm the devil incarnate.
You talk about this in Notes from the Highway, but what did you think of Brian Johnson's recent explanations that Bond didn't have anything to do with Back in Black?
I thought it was pathetic. I mean, I think a lot of people were incredibly disappointed in that book that there wasn't going to be more about the making of Back in Black, about his own writing process, more explanation about how he allegedly sort of came up with the songs that are on that album, and those songs are credited to him. And his view is, I wrote them and that's that, and fuck off. Basically, that seems to be the explanation in the book, but he doesn't address any of the things that have been written about the album, by me in Bond: The Last Highway, by Clinton Walker in his book, about Vince Lovegrove. Vince Lovegrove had no time for Brian Johnson. He made that very clear. Vince Lovegrove was the one of the lead singers in the Valentines with Bon Scott. He became a journalist. He appeared to actively dislike Brian Johnson. So I'm not saying that Brian Johnson is a liar, but I'm saying that I don't find his explanations very convincing, particularly when he had no experience writing lyrics when he first joined the band.
Mm.
He had 6 credits on some co-writes for Geordie, and they weren't very good songs. And then right off the bat, he writes "You Shook Me All Night Long." That's fucking incredible. Wow. To do that in 15 minutes in the cabin in the Bahamas after a visit from Bon Scott's ghost is really impressive.
Why do you think?
I don't find it convincing.
Yeah,
no. That's my personal opinion. But as we all know, officially, Brian Johnson wrote that song.